Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Get Psyched show. Today I'm joined by Ailsa Wylie, a former Scottish international hockey player. As a former athlete, we talk about Ailsa's hockey career, from growing up through hockey, overcoming disappointment and balancing a career at the same time. Ailsa gives such an amazing insight 10 years on from her high and end of her career finishing in Glasgow in 2014. I hope you enjoy the show, and if so, please feel free to share it with a friend. Thanks. Hi Ailsa, how are you?
Hi George, really good, thank you. Lovely to see you.
And you, thank you so much for joining me today. Just to start with, could you give us sort of a brief overview of your career from, I guess, when you left school all the way up until what you're working in now?
Yeah, certainly. So that's going back a wee while now, right enough. But I was at school in Dundee and left school to go to do a course at Stirling University in Sports Studies and Marketing. So it was a joint honours degree because I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do at that stage. And at that time, I was also an international hockey player with the Scotland women's team. So went to Stirling, had an amazing 4 years there doing the course, and over that time just kind of breaking into the senior women's team from the under 21s hockey programme. And I was really fortunate just in my last year of university, I'd been helping do some coaching and volunteering with Stirling Council at that time in their sports development department. And I'd taken on kind of a part-time position, just doing some work with them to organise. It was an Olympic festival back in 2004 in the summer. So I'd been working with Stirling for a wee while, and a sports development officer job came up just before I finished my 4th year at university, and I was encouraged to apply for that. So again, didn't quite know what I wanted to do when I left uni, but this job had come up, and I thought I may as well apply and see what happens. And then from then on, that you just kind of get sucked into that machine. So started off my career as a sports development officer in Stirling. They then transitioned into Active Stirling, so the trust, and I moved a couple of times within that, within the sports development team. So taking on sports development. I also was an active communities manager at one point with them. That was really interesting because that was different kind of teams that I was involved in at that time, away from kind of school, sport and young people work. So I was working with walking programmes and older adults, working closely with NHS referral programmes. So really kind of different experience, health and fitness programmes with the peak when that was all getting started and had just opened in Stirling. So really fortunate to have that position and to get different experience in managing people. And then from then I went on to become a partnership manager with Sport Scotland. And then have stayed with Sport Scotland since, and I've again had a few roles within that time. So partnership manager with local authorities, looking after young people programmes in school sport, and then at the moment I'm active schools lead manager and still involved with school sport programmes that we run at Sport Scotland as well.
Amazing. Thank you for that overview. We're going to come a wee bit later on to sort of the work you do now and sort of your work in sports development as well. But just going back to your hockey career, obviously you mentioned that you played internationally for Scotland and you went through the setups. What age did you start playing hockey?
So I started hockey at school in primary six, and obviously at that point it was on grass. So it's again going back a number of years. I was probably quite a sporty child. I had three brothers, which I think helps because you're just kind of in the mix with them and competing against them all the time when you're growing up. So yeah, definitely quite an active, sporty childhood growing up in Dundee. And then just, I put myself forward for everything at school. School was very good with sport when I was there and had loads of opportunities, and it was just, don't know why, but I just really enjoyed all sport and activity. So, wanted to play for every team that I could at school sport, and hockey just, I guess, was the thing that was the main sport through schooling. My PE teacher had mentioned about joining a club. My brothers all played at football clubs, so it was quite natural for my mum and dad. We found the kind of local hockey club in Dundee, and off I went and started playing club hockey. And then that was really kind of where it all started. At 14, I got into a kind of Midlands development squad. Again, just through playing club hockey in Dundee. Same coaches at club that then took sessions within the development squad. So again, once you'd started playing, you kind of got into the different opportunities that were given. And then from there, went into kind of the Scottish setup. So under 16s, under 18s, under 21s, and then senior women. But I have to say, over the years, I didn't get selected and picked for everything. There was times through that where I did get dropped or out of squads and then back in. So it wasn't all kind of plain sailing from starting at 14 and then getting right through.
Yeah, and I guess that point about getting dropped from squads, how did you deal with that? Obviously, you went on to make many appearances for Scotland, but it wasn't plain sailing. So what was your reaction to that, and were you quite consistent with how you reacted to missing out on these opportunities?
Yeah, and I mean, I think at the time you're in it, so you don't really appreciate what you're doing or how you react to things. You just kind of go through life. But now I think looking back, it is really interesting just to kind of think a bit deeper about it. And I've got a lot of kind of friends and hockey friends who did come out of hockey at various stages for different reasons. And you kind of look back and think, oh, why was that? Because very easily, um, I think after your first kind of rejection, you could be like, oh, it's not for me. I'm not cut out for this. I didn't get picked and I'm just going to stop playing. And for some reason, I didn't. I kept turning up and I kept wanting to do it. And I don't really know why that was. I think my mum and dad have always said I'm very like determined and I've got a streak that I don't outwardly project. I don't think I probably appear quite soft on the outside, but I think inside there's something that's definitely quite driven and quite determined. So yeah, I mean, I think I can remember there was a big, it was a festival or tournament in Edinburgh, under 18s, I think it was. So I was probably 17 at the time, and I didn't get picked. And the coach had just kind of fed back that wasn't good enough in terms of getting into the team. I remember being really massively disappointed at that. It was a home opportunity. All the parents and everything were going through to Edinburgh to watch and support the girls. So I remember that one sticks out as, you know, something that I was absolutely gutted not to be part of. But it made me probably more determined to get picked the next time. And to not be missed out again. So I don't know if it gives you that extra wee kind of drive then when you go back into
Yeah,
training and sessions to play even better. But I do think at that point it could have been a turning point for me to be, you know, going away. Going away to university. I could easily have just kind of stepped back and thought, no, this isn't for me. But so pleased that I never, because then, as you say, I did get so many opportunities to then play further into my career and train all through kind of university. So dual kind of training and studying and then working and playing. So I've always had that kind of juggle of doing both and always really enjoyed kind of both doing both.
yeah. I wonder if growing up with your brothers gave you that sort of resilience where they're always
Yeah,
going to be getting on top
potentially.
of you. Yeah, yeah. Just on, you sort of spoke about that the opportunity in Edinburgh when you're 17, and at that age you're doing important exams to get into university, the next step of your life. Did your results or sort of your involvement in hockey, what was going on in your sport, ever sort of affect how you were feeling or how you were performing in school or in work, or was it very separate? Were you sort of like, this is this area, this is that area, they don't really mix?
Yeah, and again, probably can't really remember a conflict back at kind of school age. And I don't know, times have definitely changed, you know, in terms of being involved in international programs and Scottish programs. There's much more of a emphasis on both now, I would say, because we know so much more and we know how to support our young people better. They're probably have more awareness as well of balance and emotional and mental well-being, whereas back when I was playing it wasn't such a big thing. And you kind of, I mean, our height of our international games and season was in the summer. So, yes, you played club hockey and you did training throughout the year. But you were away kind of, it was Easter and summer. So it was kind of just after your exams had finished. And then you would go away in the summer and do your programme. So it's kind of school age. I remember there being a lot of kind of conflicts or challenges. You just managed it and did both, and got through it. I do remember a lot of trips, especially with the club. We were quite successful as a club team and would go away to Europe. And there was definitely a bunch of us that were studying when we were away. So we must have had exams coming up after the tournament. I think more at university, there was definitely a recognition that there had to be some sort of balance and give. And that's one of the reasons I went to Stirling. Was it was very early days of their sports scholarship kind of programme. And all that meant is you got additional support. So you were able to meet with the advisor and just kind of go through your programme for your sport and what that would mean. And then was there any help or assistance? So moving kind of deadlines to suit training and when you were away at competition. And that was really helpful just to know in advance that you didn't have to stress and worry about it, that the clashes had already kind of been recognised. And again, that programme's, continued and taken it to new heights now with the scholarship athletes that they've got at Stirling.
Yeah, I guess looking at university now, not just at Stirling, but across sort of every university in the UK, trying in some way to be able to say, look, we've got athletes, but we want to give them this balanced life where they can still get a degree and still be a student while being almost a top level athlete. I look for Edinburgh University at the moment, and the women's rugby team are basically professional athletes while being students. The funding's there and they're getting looked after. But it's such a good way of doing it if you're at this sort of high elite level of sport, but you're still a young person who wants to get your degree, then it's such a brilliant way of doing it. So it's good to see that you're almost
and as you say, unis have recognised that. So Strathclyde, Stirling, Edinburgh, they're really going out their way, Aberdeen, to support their young people, which is amazing.
Yeah, just letting people excel on many fronts, which is such an amazing opportunity. I think as well, obviously you spoke about going through the pathways, and it wasn't, you didn't suddenly become good at hockey at 18. You sort of progressed and got better through the years. How did you find the step up between the age groups? I guess a lot as well from the under 21s to the senior women's team. How did you deal with those step ups to the next level?
Yeah, I think again, kind of looking back, it was quite natural. There was a group of us of similar ages. When I do look back, I don't think there was anyone else from there was a couple of us, from my specific age group that then moved together, but our club team supplied quite a depth of the international setup for my age. So I was really used to playing with the players who were maybe like a year younger or a year older, or then a few years either side. And we all played together week in, week out at club, and a lot of us were then involved in the international setup. So I don't think there was anyone in my specific Scottish kind of under 21 age group that made the transition all the way through, but there was certainly such a core group of us that played together for both club and country, which was amazing because it was, that group of people that you got to know so well. And the step up didn't feel, there wasn't a lot of difference then. And I think in the early years when I'd gone along to some sessions, there was still a core group of Scottish internationalists who were older, and then a lot of them retired at the same time. So there was almost a natural flow and progression then through to this next kind of core group that came. And there's so many team dynamics, and in a way we were so lucky that we grew together, all of us kind of making the transition at a similar time. And there was a few experienced players within that who'd made, the Commonwealth Games cycle before, and then they were part of that core group of club who I played internationally with. So yeah, it was a really amazing kind of time to be involved. and to be able to kind of grow together as that team that then all played together internationally.
Yeah, I get that sort of, as you say, the team dynamics, and I guess the culture. If you've got a strong group of you that known each other for a wee while with a few experienced heads, they talk about it in sort of football or rugby all the time as well. But if you've got these groups with lots of young, experienced, energetic group and then those experienced heads, it can work really well. Yeah, I think coming on to sort of you've got an amazing story around the 2014 Commonwealth Games as well, about your involvement in the squad. Could you just sort of talk through that story a wee bit as well?
Yeah, so I think that whole kind of between 2010 and being at the Commonwealth Games in Delhi, and then knowing that the next games was a home games, there was a lot of us that continued to play knowing that it was the next Commonwealth Games was going to be Glasgow. And that period was just such a high time for sport in the UK and in Scotland, knowing that we had the Olympics in 2012 and then the Glasgow Games. So after 2010, I knew that there was no chance I was stepping down or retiring. I wanted to be part of that next 4-year programme and to be part of the 2014 Games. Within that time, Sport Scotland Institute of Sport was extremely kind of supportive over sport and the way that they were looking at supporting their athletes in the lead up to the home games. And the Scottish women were really fortunate where we got funding to go full time. So we had, I think it was 6 months in total, and we split it up to go full time for 3 months in the summer months of 2013 before the Europeans, and then 3 months before the Glasgow Games in 2014. And that was amazing because we'd all been juggling work and studying and playing, and it was like having two full-time jobs essentially. The programme was so well supported by the Institute, and we had amazing programmes around strength and conditioning, physical prep, our physio. So all of these support services were helping us, be essentially kind of full-time athletes for hockey, but none of us were full-time because we all then had this other life where we went off and we had teachers, physios, myself working in sports development. So a whole range of different careers going on while we were all then kind of committed and playing to hockey. And I'd say, we were really committed to our training before work, squeezing in sessions during work, then meeting up and training and being on the pitch after work, kind of week in, week out through this kind of whole period. And we all accepted that that was just life. That's what you did. And as I say, we were all very committed to that. So to get these opportunities to be a full-time athlete was so special because it hadn't happened before in hockey. And it really allowed the team and the management to kind of see, what does that mean? What does that look like? And your day's then very different because you're not having to get up really early to go and do a weight session or a pitch session before you start work. You're able to just build that into your day. And I have to say, all of the organisations that employed us were then very supportive to allow people the time off to go and do this and to get the leave. And that was work again between the Institute support. We didn't have to do that ourselves. The Institute and Sport Scotland were able to help everyone individually get the arrangement with their employers to allow us to kind of train as a squad. So really kind of special. For some reason, I wasn't playing that well and my confidence definitely dipped. And I think by coming into kind of European selection, which was really key because that was our last big tournament before the 2014 Games then, the following summer. So I definitely had recognised it myself that I wasn't playing well, and I don't know if I did much about it. I think my confidence was just low, and I was probably looking and seeking for external validation from somebody to kind of say, "Come on, Ailsa, it's okay. You can do this. You're in this." And again, I've had many discussions with the coach since that period of time where I probably should have raised it and spoken out earlier to the management team, but I didn't. I kind of kept it all in. And as I say, I probably stopped believing in myself, that I was good enough to play because I knew, I wasn't performing very well in training. So what that resulted in was not getting selected for the 2013 Europeans, and that was a huge blow. And I think at that point, my mum and dad were like, "Oh, you've achieved so much. Maybe this is the time. Maybe you should just retire." And I was thinking, retire? We've got a home games next year. How could I possibly retire now? But in their way, they were just a bit like, "Well, this has happened. You've not been selected, so maybe the time's now." In my own head, I knew there was no way that was a possibility, and I wanted to give it my all. And I think at that point, and this is really late on in my hockey career, if you like, because I probably did know that retirement was coming up. I was in my 30s. I knew I wanted a family. So I knew 2014 probably was the time that I was going to finish. And I definitely didn't want to finish by not playing in that kind of home Commonwealth Games. So not being selected for the Europeans was massive, because that was almost a tournament where the management team were able to kind of start looking at players and kind of thinking they wanted to do well at that tournament. For the Europeans, that was really important for our whole management of the programme, for getting funding. So it was a big tournament to miss out on. And I remember kind of getting in touch with the coach a week after they got back to kind of say, "Can I meet you and discuss like the programme going forward? And I want to make changes to my training and how I'm balancing it all." And I think he was a bit taken aback, thinking, "Wow, I'm just back from the Europeans, give me a minute." But I just had something in me that I just wanted to give myself the best shot. So we kind of discussed different things that we could do. And I'd said, what is it? Why didn't I get picked? What was it that I'm missing and lacking? And we went through kind of the different elements of my position and skills. So I was like, right, well, how could I get better at that? So we came up with having like a one-to-one pitch session. And that hadn't been part of the programme up until then. And I think that kind of kick-started, even for the coach, a different way of maybe working with the players and being able to fit it in. So we started off these 7:00 Monday morning pitch sessions in Glasgow from that September after they'd got back from the Europeans. And I also sat down with the strength and conditioning coaches and support just to kind of see how do I maximise and get better at maybe what I'm not good at fitness-wise. And we worked out a more bespoke programme. And again, the support I got from everyone coach-wise, hockey coach-wise, and also strength and conditioning from the Institute was amazing. They were so adaptable, and almost, I think for them, it was like, right, well, let's have a wee project and what would happen if we changed different elements to the programme and worked on it. So from that kind of September to December time, I was like focused like I'd never been before. A lot of the girls had obviously been at the Europeans and then came back in to start training again. And I do remember a few comments of, "Oh my goodness, what's happened to Ailsa?" Like every session, I was just determined to do my best and kind of show my worth and show that I was, good enough to be picked. And I think that probably hadn't come out, in my personality before. And I just remember like every session you're training in the winter, it's getting into the darker months, you're turning up and the pitch is a wee bit frozen. And I just, looking back, I just think I was very kind of focused to every session. I was like, right, I need to kill this and show that I'm worthy of selection. And then that kind of continued. So into January, we had a trip over in South Africa, kind of warm weather training to get us on the pitch when we can't train in Scotland. And again, because of the deselection in the summer, I'd spoken to the coach just around the selection process. And not that it'd come out the blue, but we hadn't had any chats through the summer period to say, if I was picking my team now, you wouldn't be in it. And that might have helped, I don't know, switch something on inside me if we'd had some of these earlier conversations. So again, the coach had taken on that feedback and had put in kind of I think it was red, amber, green kind of programming so that he could have honest conversations with players around their performance rather than waiting till selection and that horrible weight of the email coming out to see whether your name was in the team or not. So yeah, there was definitely different changes, and I was probably quite unexperienced member of the team at that point, and was able to have these honest conversations with the coach and the management team that I might not have had earlier on in my career, without that kind of knowledge and approach. And I think that, again, it's really amazing when you do get listened to and heard by a coaching team and they take on feedback to say, oh, well, actually, there is areas for improvement here for us all. So when we went away to South Africa and had the training camp, that was when the kind of green, amber, red was put in place. So then the coach was able to say, right, well, at the moment you're sitting here. And if we were picking the team, next week, here's where you would be on the list. And that really helped players, because we all go through peaks and troughs where you're maybe not playing and training as well as you could be. And for people to know where they are in the coach's mind and have that honest conversation about why that might be. And it might be, your work or your study, or there was something else external making you not train or be as focused as much. And it probably helps have some of these honest conversations between players and the coaching. So played well in South Africa and felt I was back, within that kind of team selection area, and that then continued. We then came back off onto full-time training. I think it was around Easter time, and we had a couple of lead-in tournaments before Glasgow 2014. And, by then I was in a much better position and stronger position, and thankfully got selected then for the Games in 2014, and was able to play in Glasgow and finish my career having achieved that and got that, which meant so much to me personally.
Scored a goal as well, didn't you? Scored a couple. There you go.
I think what was so nice, the first match of the tournament, and I scored a goal that was kind of a half volley, but it was what I'd been working on and training on the one-to-ones with the coach from that period, from the September before. And it was just like everything had just come into place, that was the type of goal that I scored for the first goal that we scored as a team in that tournament. And I just thought, oh, wow, that has made a difference.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, you've it's an amazing story. Just on the performance colours thing, sort of a red, amber, green, I find that really interesting, because you can look at it two ways, where one, it's like this constant sort of reminder of where you are in the pecking order, miss pressure, if you drop down, go up. Some people could see it like that, whereas you said for yourself and for others that it was great because it was just really clear and it encouraged those positive conversations. So why was it such a good thing for you, do you think?
I think in the past, there was you assumed where you were in the squad, and there was probably a bit of me in 2013 that I had been a member of the senior team for a number of years by that point, and quite an established member of being selected. So although I knew I wasn't training and playing that well, in the back of my head I kind of thought, will he still pick me? Because, the coaching team's been together for a number of years, they know me, I am an older player within the team and the setup. But looking back, we hadn't had that conversation. The coach hadn't had it with me and I hadn't had it with him. And now looking back, you think, oh my God, just have the chat and have the conversation. But there wasn't that opportunity to have that with the setup that we'd had. So you were left kind of unsure. And then selection came out, and I remember I was really, really nervous, and I probably knew that it wasn't 100% going to be. But still, when I got that email, and by that point I was Ailsa Wylie, so Wylie down at the bottom, alphabetical order. I remember scrolling and being like, oh my God, my name's not there, and then re-scrolling thinking, have I missed it? And it's a horrible position to be in, not knowing if you're going to be picked or not, and then not being picked. So I definitely saw it as a positive, and it worked for me. But you're right, it wasn't great for everybody, because if you're then said, well, at the moment you're down in the reds, how does that play out with people's confidence and where they are, themselves just in life at that point? And it's maybe not the perfect solution. And it's really interesting. I love reading about other teams and success and what makes a successful team and how coaches deal with and manage different things. And there's a whole host of different ways of doing it. And I guess that was one example where we were trying to get a bit more transparent in conversations could happen between players and coaches. And that was our first kind of stab at it, I guess, as a coaching unit and player team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's true. Like, you've got this sort of, it's a good way of, if everyone agrees that this is a system we're going to use, and if we can all buy into it, then cool, it works. But you've got to have that buy-in. And as well, it's like, yeah, we'll have
Yeah.
this sort of equal approach for every player, but then every player is different as well. Some people like an arm around the shoulder, some others need a kick up the arse. So, like, seeing yourself in red
Yeah.
can be a proper motivator for some. It can be just disillusion others. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting way of
And I
doing
think
it.
that's, yeah, and it's so true because I definitely was a player who liked external validation, a coach saying you're playing well or you're doing the right thing. I did seek that. And I guess what changed when I got dropped in 2013 was as like, oh my God, if I don't believe in myself, there's no way others could believe in me. And, the coach had said that. He's like, I could tell you weren't believing in yourself. So I'm not going to pick you if you don't even believe you can do it and you can perform. And that was such a changing moment for me. And it's annoying it came so late in my career because there was only a few more tournaments to be part of before I then finished. And that's, looking back, I wish I'd believed in myself more earlier. But it just wasn't my personality type.
Yeah.
I wasn't a, I guess, overtly confident, person who could strut about and have that air of confidence. And sometimes people will look at that and think, oh my God, that player's so arrogant. But actually, having that self belief and self confidence is important when you're an athlete, a sports person. And there's definitely people that have that more naturally than others. And for me, it was more, somebody telling me, oh, you're playing really well, you're doing really well, you're doing the right thing. And not every coach is good at giving that. And especially, I think sometimes male coaches working with female teams, you've got, in a hockey squad, 24, 26 females altogether with hugely varying personalities and types. And, if a coach is one type, which is maybe a bit harder and not given, any of that kind of positive reinforcement, that'll work for some and be like, oh, I need to just, do this for myself. But for others, there's a softer side that's sometimes completely missing. But I think that's what's fascinating about teams, individuals, management teams, that whole system has to work if you're going to perform and, be a unit that's successful. And I really like looking at the GB team and setup in the lead up to 2012, 2008, 2012, and then winning the gold in Rio in 2016, because that gold winning mentality that's been spoken about and what was set up, that was a whole team that believed in themselves and that spoke about that a lot in the lead up to these different kind of Olympic cycles. So yeah, there's so much, and you'll be well aware of how that works in the team and everything that's working beneath that around individual personalities all kind of gelling together at the right time for success.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you said sort of like you figured this out about yourself, but you need all this external validation quite late. But I guess that's just sort of maturity and the experience that you got throughout your career. And although it maybe took a wee bit later, that's just your career and how it works. Um, just on
Yeah,
the sort of
absolutely.
yeah, on the sort of 2013 summer point of view, you were very proactive, I guess, in creating that conversation. As you said, it was a week after that your coach had got back from the European Championships, and I'm sure it was maybe a bit of missing out. You were like, I need to remind him that I'm still here, even though I wasn't there.
I'm here.
Um,
I watched every
yeah,
game when you were away.
yeah. I would have done this, and this. But yeah, being
Yep.
proactive in that in that conversation. Do you think there was a reason why you had sort of had that dip in form and dip in performance over that summer? Can you think of there was something that was going on at work or in your own life, or was it just maybe the pressure, or was it just sort of a natural change in performance?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Like looking back, it's hard to say were other players performing better, playing well, because it was such a big year. There was a few younger, new or different players coming into the team at that point. And sometimes that kind of like raises the bar when you've got other people then coming in and challenging for positions. So yeah, there was nothing specifically, and I was busy at work and juggling everything. But by that point, I think I was quite used to just that kind of churn of doing both. And maybe it was too much, looking back, thinking I'd had taken on more responsibility at work, had changed my role. But yeah, I never kind of saw any of that as a huge challenge, and I never wanted to stop my work for hockey. I was really passionate about my career and wanting to do well in my career, as well as wanting to perform and be an athlete, and maybe that was unrealistic, and it was hard doing both. But as I say, I felt like I disappointed myself. I felt like I disappointed work colleagues. I felt like I disappointed my family when I didn't get picked, because Sport Scotland had obviously invested in the programme and given everyone the opportunity to become full-time for these 3 months. So everyone at work knew about it. And obviously they'd granted me the time off to go and train and play. And then I never got picked, and I was back at work when the tournament was happening. So it was a big, I don't think anyone else, they were obviously disappointed for me. I don't think I disappointed them, but my kind of way of looking at it was, I've let everybody down. I've let myself down, and it was like it was embarrassing, not to have made it and to be picked. So I don't know if all of that contributed to, I really now need to kind of overdo the other stuff when we come back and really push my boat out to get picked then for 2014. I think because I work in sport and I work for the national agency, when the Commonwealth Games is on, everyone at work's aware and knows about it, and they knew that I was part of the hockey team. So to not be part of it was massive, and that was definitely maybe spurred me on as well, that I wanted to be part of it so badly, and yeah, to play at home games, there's just nothing like that.
Yeah. And I guess having that home games in 2014, you knew straight after Delhi, and as you said, it was sort of like years of excitement, because the opportunity to play home games is one that not many athletes get to do. So that was, I guess, a long-term goal that you had. Whether you sort of wrote it down, it was just there. Like, everyone knew about it. The whole country knew about it. It was that sort of long-term goal. That was, did you ever set other goals, whether it's short term or long goal, throughout your career that sort of helped you develop, or were you just sort of like go with the flow each season?
Yeah, I mean, the big kind of tournament for us in between a Commonwealth Games is the Europeans. And that's, as a Scottish athlete, because hockey's mixed between GB and then Scottish English representation. As a Scottish player, not part of the GB setup, then your Europeans is the biggest kind of tournament that you're able to be part of. And in my playing career over that kind of 10-year period, we were sometimes in A division, which is the top 8 teams in Europe. And then we're sometimes in the lower B division, where we'd been relegated and had to get promoted back up. So that was always kind of the big, that happens every other year. And in terms of goal setting, I think it was always about the next tournament that was coming up and be selected for it. So the Europeans kind of falls out with then a Commonwealth Games year. And that's kind of what you were building to and wanting to play in. When you were in A division, it's all kind of changed now. But back when I played, that top 8 teams in Europe's massive, because you've got really good hockey nations within Europe. So, Holland, Germany, they are amazing countries to go and play hockey in, just because of the setup and the scale of it over there. The clubs have all got, 6, 7 pitches around. There's a few places in Holland that we've been where hockey is the main sport of that town that you're going to. So it's massive, it's a stadium rather than just a pitch with a couple of stands that have been put in for that particular tournament. It's completely different. So I think in terms of goal setting, it was very much around selection for tournaments. Whether that's right or wrong, it was, I guess, your training programme. I mean, we always had kind of 4-year cycle training programs, so you kind of knew annually what your year looked like in terms of when the tournaments were, when your busy periods were. when your downtime was. So that was very structured and planned out. And that's kind of how you lived your life. So you knew 3 years in advance what your weekends were looking like, really, and what your schedule was. And that's for so long. I was just in that cycle of that's how you kind of planned your life out. Um, and that's how you knew kind of what you were aiming to get to that for that year.
Yeah. And just, I guess, last question regarding your hockey career. You've spoken about these sort of setbacks and dealing with things mentally as well. Did you ever get the opportunity, especially when the institute was involved and helped funding the full-time periods? Did you ever get the chance to work with a sports psychologist or someone in that field to help?
Yeah, so that was probably again that latter kind of cycle, that 4 year cycle to the home games. And we worked with a psychologist as a team. And that was really interesting because, as I say, it's about you all coming together, regardless of your different personalities, but all being very focused on what your goal was as a team and how we wanted to perform as a team and what our um, I guess different triggers were that we were all comfortable with for that team performance. And looking back, there probably wasn't a huge amount then individually. And I think we did all meet with the psychologist and have a chat with them individually and had a couple of sessions, but it wasn't in great depth. And again, looking back, you kind of think, in my situation, would I have realised things earlier if that had happened when I was younger? And just that self awareness of how you are and how you deal with things. And if you'd kind of spoken that through. But yeah, I think, looking back, it was definitely more about how you were in the team, what you were offering within that team environment, what kind of personality were you, what were you bringing, and then do you all have that same goal in order for performance? And we had quite a number of sessions just in and around what that looks like, who we are as a team, how we carry ourselves, how are we going to perform, how do we deal with losing a goal really early on. And I think speaking about these things is brilliant because you're all on the same page. So when something does go wrong and you lose a goal in the first 5 minutes of a game, it's like, oh, it's okay, we've spoken about this, we know how to react, we know that the game's not over. And there's huge value from doing that, especially in a team sport where everyone's reaction could be totally different.
Yeah. I guess like sort of an overarching theme I've gotten out from you speak about your career is just this openness to talk about things and just like, let's get the truth out and let's get a plan with that. There's no point sort of covering it up or hiding or being unsure. Let's just speak the truth, get it out, and then make a plan from that, which is really good to hear.
Yep, 100%. And I think like looking at my work life, I'm probably quite like that at work where, I like everyone knowing the same and having these honest conversations to then make a plan, take things forward. So it's maybe that's just me, but that's what works.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, it's interesting, and we're going to come on to that now. I guess sort of your post hockey career and your work with Sport Scotland. Firstly, what was it like after retirement? What did you see? Obviously, there'll be a slight change in your lifestyle, but did you continue playing hockey? Were you still just as active, or did you take maybe a bit of time just to relax?
Yeah, I mean, I think in regards, because I'd always worked and trained, it wasn't a huge transition because I do see athletes and I'd read about, that transition and it's really hard because they've lost their identity. They were known as the athlete and suddenly they've retired and they're no longer the athlete. And you're like, who am I? What am I? What am I doing with my life? Whereas I think in my situation, I'd got a job, straight after uni, had graduated and I was in a position and that then continued. I didn't have a break from my career, bar the two times that we were funded in that kind of 3 month periods. So the transition wasn't huge. It was just I made that decision to stop playing international hockey. And the main reason around that is because I wanted to have a family. And that was, in my head, it was like, right, stop playing hockey and start a family. And I was really lucky because that happened quickly after I finished. So retired after Glasgow in 2014. The intention was to continue playing club hockey for that season. Still definitely wanted to be involved in playing. But I had my first wee boy Finn in 2015. So again, that made things much easier in a way, because you've got your hands full when you're going through pregnancy and then having a wee one. That's becomes your life, and that becomes the centre of what you're kind of focusing on. So again, kind of with work, I'd just gone back into work after 2014, and worked and then finished to then, be off with Finn on maternity. So for me, I was really, really fortunate and lucky it worked out that way. I think, again, kind of looking back, there wasn't that huge period of a huge loss, from not being part of hockey. And I think the only thing I just in my head had thought I would have played more club hockey after finishing from Glasgow. And because then I fell pregnant, I stopped playing, and I have been back in between having both the boys, and probably the last 2 seasons I've played more than I had done after I finished. But it's always there, it's always part of you. I love being part of a team, I love what you get from that. I mean, a lot of friends is from hockey. You spent more time with them than your own family for a lot of the career, just with travelling, training, being away on trips, sharing rooms. So yeah, you definitely build up a really unique friendship with your teammates, especially when you've played with the same kind of group of players for a lot of years, a good number of years. You do know them on a different level to other people. So it's really special when you get to meet up with them and be with them now, and that tends to happen at kind of weddings and different occasions that we all get together.
Yeah, you timed that very, very well, didn't you? Straight from hockey career to
Yeah, very
mum the
fortunate
next
the way it
year.
worked out.
Yeah, that's good. A good excuse for not turning up to training, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
that was it.
I guess as well, coming on to your career now. Obviously, you're working with Sport Scotland. You've been there for a number of years now. Could you just explain a bit about what your day-to-day role looks right now at the moment, the projects you're working on, and sort of the work you do with Sport Scotland?
Yep. So at the moment, I'm a lead manager within the school and community team. And so looking at kind of grassroots school level sport. So my main role is looking after the Active Schools programme. So Active Schools is a national programme within Scotland. There's over 400 active school managers and coordinators, and every local authority have a team. And their role is to go out into schools and to look at extracurricular activity for children and young people. So both primary and secondary schools, and it's trying to put programmes in and around the school day that is helping young people get the opportunity to experience a sport and be part of an activity, which is kind of preceding maybe going along to a club session and playing club sport. So it's trying to give every child that chance to try sport and to go along to something that's organised in their kind of school setting or local, so that there's no travel and no cost for them being able to participate. So that programme keeps you busy throughout the year. We work very closely with the local authorities. We've got a team of partnership managers who are out working with the authorities and with the Active Schools teams. And nationally, we would then kind of set the priorities and aims of the programme and kind of run that national side of the programme and do a lot of work with the managers to make that happen in Scotland. So that's kind of the main Active Schools programme, as I say, is the main part of my job. I also look after some of the women and girls work that we do as a national agency, and that's very much about the focus on kind of teenage dropout. So we know the data tells us that teenage girls have a tendency to stop playing sport or dropping out of what they're currently doing from activity point of view. And we have a number of programmes and support in place to try and buck that trend and work with young people work with young girls to stop them from dropping out or taking time out from sport when they go through that kind of period from S2 to S4. So we do many programmes in and around that. So a lot of my work and programmes is in and around that young people space. And over the years, I've helped with the Young People Sports Panel. which you were part of, and that's how we met. And there's also school sport awards and young ambassadors. So kind of programs that help support active schools and give them the opportunity to work with young people locally. And it's almost using sport to give young people different skills and tools. So young people as leaders in sport is the kind of overarching aim that we have, and it's about working then with the local authority teams to try and help them with the tools and the programs that they can put in place to support young people as leaders. And as you know, and you've lived through, there's so many things that young people get from being a leader within sport that then helps them with other skills for life, for going on to further study and education. And it's trying to get that right for Scotland. So trying to get a model that every young person then gets the opportunity to be part of if they choose.
Excellent, good stuff. You've given a really good overview of everything there. Obviously, you're balancing like a huge range of tasks and roles and projects going on around the country. How is this sort of how do you balance it and working with a lot of different people? How are do those skills relate to what you did in hockey, and have they been able to transfer those sort of sporting skills into this environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally I've always been kind of a organised person who loves a timetable, loves a planner. My dad always used to say if I spent as much time actually studying and learning stuff as I did writing things out and highlighting things and rewriting it out on a different paper and putting schedules together, he was like, just study. Why are you like, I loved making my study plans and maybe not doing the actual studying then as much. But I think I'm very drawn to that, and I've probably lived my life that way. I think hockey, in a way, helped that because you had your schedules. I was saying that kind of 4 year overview and the highlighted boxes and all the different colours meaning different things. Um, I like managing my time in that kind of way, and I'm still like that probably, at work, kind of knowing what's coming up, when the key things are, and then working back from that. So, what's the small steps you have to do in order to make that happen? And get to that place. And again, I think hockey's been amazing because it gave me that ability to juggle different priorities and almost switch off from one thing onto another. So focus on your training in hockey. Oh, you're in work now, you need to focus on work. Put all that to the back of your head. And again, I don't know, I've just built that up, I think, from living like that for so long. And I can probably in work do that as well, just kind of switch off from one thing, focus on another thing, get it done, move on. I love a list. I love being able to tick off what I've done, what still needs to be done. Just before Christmas there, wrote out my list, what do I need to think about when I'm back in January. And then starting work yesterday, it's amazing because you're like, right, here's my list. This is what I said I was going to do, and picking it up. So yeah, I don't know if sport's given me that or if that's just how I am, but definitely organisation, time management, the juggling of different priorities and switching on and off between different tasks. That's what I try and do in work, and it doesn't always happen. There's definitely periods where you go through where everything is just happening and you're trying to catch up and you feel like you're not doing anything as well as it should be doing when you're busy, but that's just life and happens. And I think, again, I'm quite good at coping with that. I try not to let it get on top of me or get bogged down. You're just a person and you can only do what you can do. And you need to just try and be as I just try and do the best that I can at all times. And that's definitely kind of something that I try and live by. I will make mistakes. I'll learn from them and I'll move on.
Yeah, nice one. Just I guess sort of last question about your career sort of stuff as well. You've spoken about how you sort of love your scheduling and making a plan for stuff, and I'll admit I'm the same. I like writing everything out and knowing dates and times and everything. And I guess as well having for your example in your hockey career, having these 4 year plans and your long term goals, and then seeing these things come to fruition and achieving them in your sort of like sports development career, with whether it's with Sports Scotland or before, what's been sort of the most rewarding thing that you've been able to do, or thing that you've achieved where you've gone, we've made a plan, and then 2-3 years down the line we've seen the outcome of it, and it's just been like, that's the thing that I'm so proud of.
I think definitely the young people's work. So I wasn't um, heavily involved in the very first sports panel that we had initially, because I think at that point I'd maybe been away playing hockey and not around. And then I'd come back, and the chief exec at that time had been along to a Young Scot event, and he'd been blown away, and he was like, we need to work with young people, what are we going to do? And my colleagues had come up with, let's have, this panel where we can chat with young people, get their views and opinions, they can help us make decisions. And the young people sports panel was created. And then over that kind of 8-9 year or 10-year period now, I've been involved on and off with every panel, to some panels a lot more heavily involved and some panels a bit lighter touch. But now looking back at these young people who were on our first panel, some of them changed career paths to come into sport because of what they got from it and got from the experiences. There's a lot that are now colleagues working in different places, either governing bodies or at universities, all involved within sport roles. And now kind of looking 10 years or now maybe 11, 12 years of having sport panels, you look back at all these amazing young people that have been touched, I guess, by sport and been part of the panel. And that is definitely, and I would speak on behalf of some colleagues as well, I think, in saying that's, the greatest or one of the greatest achievements, is engaging with young people, listening to them, taking on views, changing approaches and changing some of what we do internally because of what they're feeding in. And that's been amazing to watch their personal development, but also the impact that's had on the national agency and our work.
Amazing. Good stuff. Yeah, it's good to hear. And I think being a part of a panel, and there were a number, I think we were the fifth one, so there was a number before, and seeing when you sort of join the panel and learn about it, seeing some of the people who are on previous ones and the jobs they're in now, it's really inspiring. It's just like, I could be there, like, just stick to it and you can get there. It's awesome. Good stuff. Right. Well, just to sort of finish up, I guess we've covered so much about sort of your hockey career, overcoming setbacks, your amazing achievements, and then all your work in sports development as well. You've had quite a busy life so far. I think that's fair to say. Also becoming a mom. What would be your sort of one piece of advice for maybe a younger person who's got a lot of things to balance? They're maybe doing really well in sport, they've got opportunities educationally, maybe work opportunities. What would be your one piece of advice for a young person who's maybe a bit overwhelmed by everything that's coming at them and not sure quite where to go, what path to go down?
Oh, that's a tricky one to finish on. There's so much in that. I don't know what way to go down, but I think when you're in it, it's so hard to see. You can't reflect back because this is just your experience, and you've not got the experience to reflect back on and to know. So definitely to listen to others and take advice, but just then in yourself know what you want for yourself. I think I mentioned, be the best that you can be is definitely something that I try and live by. It might not be the standards of somebody else. It might supersede the standards of other people, but I can then go to bed every night and know that I've been the best that I can be. I've performed the best. I've done the best, whether it was a meeting or whether it was something you were hosting or whether it was a sport related. But knowing that you've put your all into something, you've not left anything unturned that you didn't want to kind of explore, and you've given yourself that kind of best chance, I think would be my advice. And just know that you've been the best you can be, and it's not, as I say, comparing yourself to other people and being the best like somebody else. It's been the best you can be.
I love that. But I read recently, actually, it was sort of getting this idea of better and best, and that we should always just be focused on being our best, because if you've got this idea of always better, then you're just like constantly thinking, right, I need to do the next thing. I need to do the next thing. You're not seeing yourself as good enough. Whereas you just focus on this idea of being the best all the time, and you can't go far wrong. Awesome. Well, Ailsa, I'd like to say a massive thank you. This has been such a brilliant episode. I love hearing about your career and everything you've achieved and gone through. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's amazing to reflect back 10 years on.